So one of the most important functions of government is to protect us from systemic corruption. Now, that is the entire reason why there is a regulatory regime to begin with. But as we discussed quite a bit on this channel, that has been thoroughly crushed. So that leaves us with law enforcement. Now, the vanguard of law enforcement in this country, especially on a nationwide level, has been the Department of Justice. And it used to be one of the most trusted institutions that we had. However, that has changed. That has changed tremendously, and I think that nobody's under the illusion that this Department of Justice under Pam Bondi is going to provide us any relief from systemic corruption or any other corruption for that matter. So how did this happen? As you might imagine, this isn't something that happened overnight. This isn't something that's new under the Trump administration. This is something that has taken years and years, decades, you might even say, to finally set in to the point to where it's at. But a lot of this happened under the Obama administration and his failure to missionize the Department of Justice in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis. So we went and we spoke with Paul Pelletier, a former DOJ prosecutor who started his DOJ career down in Miami, dealing with the drug cartels back in the day, and then later on in Maine Justice with white-collar crime. He had a front row seat to where this turned from the Department of Justice being the stalwart for the general nationwide community of the United States to basically being complicit in the criminogenic environment that we find ourselves in today. And so there's nobody who has a better perspective on how this happened than Paul Pelletier, and you're going to hear from him right now.
I came up in the Department of Justice in a time when they met the need and they met the problem. We are in a whole new world today. I actually saw how the Department of Justice came together both as prosecutors, as leaders, sometimes with Congress, sometimes with the executive branch, to deal with current crises or problems. We had the savings and loan crisis, right? And I saw how the department and all the regulatory agencies came together to actually stop the type of corruption and lawlessness that was happening in the savings and loans industry. We ended up making a huge, I think, difference, at least in terms of stymieing that type of behavior and letting the public know there was a cop on the beat. So that's the Department of Justice I came up in. In relation to how politics was influencing the Department of Justice, I was involved in the prosecution of Purdue Pharma and the executives at Purdue Pharma. And I, for the first time in my Department of Justice experience, saw a fly in the ointment, if you will, when that case was shut down for no reason that involved law or facts. Rudy Giuliani, who was running for president at the time, he was representing Purdue Pharma. And they hired a bunch of well-heeled people. The Deputy Attorney General, Paul McNulty, he came from the Hill. He shut down the case based upon his loyalties, in my opinion, to Rudy Giuliani and all the money that was involved in Purdue Pharma and what the prosecutors wanted to do to prosecute the Purdue Pharma company and the executives. And they shut it down in a way that I've never seen before. Fast forward to the great financial crisis, we all know what happened there, right? There were significant Wall Street crimes going on. And the banks were definitely involved in those crimes in some way. There were frauds and they were provable. But what we had was, and I'll point to this type of corruption, right? What we had was two types of corruption. One, we had Lanny Brewer going on TV, I think it was Frontline, basically saying that because lawyers had blessed a lot of this conduct, that it was not criminal, which was a false statement. The lawyers had not blessed this conduct, number one. Number two, he said the law required a type of mens rea that was false. He misquoted the law. So we have an assistant attorney general of the criminal division saying that we weren't prosecuting because lawyers had blessed transactions wasn't true. 2, he didn't understand the fundamental principles of white collar or wire fraud or mail fraud. Didn't understand them. So that's what we had on that level. Then we have the bigger level. We had the Attorney General publicly meeting with Jamie Dimon at a time when his bank was being looked at, and he, if he wasn't a target of the investigation, he was at least a subject of the investigation. No Attorney General meets publicly with a subject of investigation. For what end? You're sending a message out there that he's different, that because he's wealthy, because he runs the largest bank or financial institution in the world, that he needs to be treated differently. So that was all public, and that was all visible to us as prosecutors and to the public, right? So why are these people with all this money have influence that they can get a meeting before the Department of Justice, right? It is absurd and can only be attributed to either not knowing or understanding what the Department of Justice is and how the process works, and or the influence of money. The fork in the road was absolutely, in my opinion, was absolutely the failure to prosecute any bankers or executives in the great financial crisis. And why is that? Americans, because that never happened, believed that they were screwed. Main Street Americans believed that they had gotten screwed. It wouldn't have taken much to show them there was a cop on the beat punishing these people. Even if the some executives got their bonuses, as long as people were going to jail. And we know this from experience because it happened in the other financial crises, right? All these people lost their jobs. The whole Rust Belt, for instance, they all lost their jobs and they never came back. Didn't see anybody go to jail, and their grievance got worse and worse and worse. And when they all saw that they were screwed, and then the executives at AIG, executives at Bank of America got their bonuses and got saved by taxpayers, they're going to say this is an unjust system, right? It's an unjust system. I have Donald Trump that agrees it's an unjust system. I'm going to vote for him. Well, Donald Trump doesn't give a fuck about you. He cares about himself, and he wants to create a system that's equally unjust and actually worse for you, but he's convinced you that it's an unjust system and that he's going to fix it. And it's impossible for him to fix it because he is precisely the reason why it continues to be unjust. Corruption, once it's allowed to fester into the system, and remember, we have all kinds of corruption, right? We have political corruption, which means that our elected officials who are sworn to an oath who are not doing what they're supposed to do, and they're personally profiting from what they are. And our president is the best example of that, right? People who suffer the most are the poor, the economically disadvantaged people, and everybody is dissatisfied. And most importantly, everybody has a grievance. And when everybody has a grievance, they look for the white knight. They look for the white knight. But it's, like I tell everybody, it takes 5 years to build a reputation and 5 seconds to knock it down. It's the same thing with corruption, right? So, and there's a reason why democracies have all traditionally all lasted less than 300 years, right? It's because corruption sets in. You can only hope that the people who are being harmed by these policies wake up. And I think that you start cutting Medicaid, start cutting school lunches. We're going to see an awakening in this country like we haven't seen in a very long time. That's my hope.